This story is from the Orchard book of Viking Stories by Robert Swindells, and it's called A Fearsome Bride, Thor and the Frost Giants. If the giants of Jotunheim had dared, they would have stormed Asgard, slaughtered the gods and taken the place for themselves. A number of things discouraged them from attempting this, including the mighty wall which surrounded the realm, but what they feared most was Thor's hammer. Thor the Thunderer called his hammer Mjolnir, and it had smashed more skulls in its time than all the other hammers in the world put together. Every inhabitant of Asgard knew the importance of Thor's hammer in keeping them safe. Imagine the consternation then when one morning the Thunderer awoke to find his hammer gone. Thor raged and bellowed and flung things around as he searched for Mjolnir, but it was no use, the weapon had disappeared. Now Loki heard Thor crashing about and hurried to see what was wrong. Thor told him, and the shape changer said, "Calm down, don't worry, we'll find Mjolnir for you." He hurried to the hall of Freya, the beautiful goddess. "Someone has stolen Thor's hammer," he told her. "Will you lend me your falcon skin so I can search for it?" Freya agreed at once. "If my falcon skin were made of pure gold, I'd still lend it for this great purpose," she said. So Loki put on the falcon skin and soared into the blue, skimming away over hill and valley till he saw below him Jotunheim, realm of the giants. There on a grassy mound sat Thrym, king of the frost giants. Loki spiralled down and landed beside him. "Good day," said Thrym. "What are you doing in Jotunheim of all places, and how are things in Asgard?" "Things are not so good in Asgard," said Loki gruffly. "Someone has stolen Thor's hammer. It wasn't you by any chance, was it?" Thrym chuckled hoarsely. "It certainly was," he said. "I've got Mjolnir, and I'm hanging on to it till Freya comes to Jotunheim and marries me." "Freya?" gasped Loki. "Marry you? Never!" The frost giant laughed, and his laughter had ice in it. Then Thor had seen the last of his precious hammer, he said. Loki knew there was no use in arguing with Thrym. He spread his falcon's wings and launched himself into the wild sky, where he rode the wind all the way home to Asgard. "Well," rumbled Thor impatiently as Loki alighted in the courtyard of his hall, "what have you found out, if anything?" The sly one pulled a face. "Nothing good, Thunderer. Thrym has your hammer, and he won't return it till we take Freya to Jotunheim to be his bride." Loki and Thor hurried to Freya's hall and told the goddess she must prepare to marry the king of the frost giants. "What?" cried Freya so loudly that the rafters shook under her lofty roof. So furious was she that her necklace burst apart, scattering gemstones across the floor. "Get out of my hall," she thrilled, "the pair of you." In the face of that awesome rage, the two gods withdrew. A short time later, all the gods and goddesses met in the great hall of Gladsheim to look for a way of getting Mjolnir back. Heimdall the watchman had a suggestion. "What if," he glanced at Thor with a twinkle in his eye, "what if we were to dress Thor in a wedding gown and a bridal veil?" His voice was drowned out as gods and goddesses exploded into laughter. Thor blushed, looking down and muttering to himself. Heimdall waited for silence, then continued. "We could repair Freya's necklace and hang it around his snowy, swan-like neck." More laughter. Thor glowered at the watchman, but Heimdall ploughed on, enjoying himself. "We must make him really beautiful, a bunch of keys at his slender waist and a long, long dress with brooches at the breast." The gods and goddesses revelled in Thor's embarrassment. They recognised the excellence of the watchman's plan. "And we mustn't forget the headdress," concluded Heimdall. "A dainty headdress will set off the rest of her outfit." Thor, who had always prided himself on his huskiness, was mortified. But the assembly insisted on adopting Heimdall's plan, and so the Thunderer permitted himself to be decked out in the prettiest bridal finery that could be found. Loki put on a woman's clothing too. He would go with the bride to Jotunheim as her maidservant. In far-off Jotunheim, Thrym's excitement knew no bounds. "She's coming," he cried. "Freya the Beautiful is on her way to Jotunheim to be my bride. We must prepare." At his command, the hall was decked with swags and garlands of wild flowers. Fresh, sweet straw was strewn on the floor. Tables and benches were set out. In the kitchens, cooks and scullions toiled to prepare a rich banquet. It was evening when the bride and her maidservant arrived. They were welcomed with great ceremony. Servants carried in huge dishes heaped with fine foods from every corner of the world and set them on the tables with fragrant loaves and flagons of wine. Thrym ushered his bride to the place of her honour, bade her be seated, and settled himself next to her. The maidservant sat on the giant's other side, and the feasting commenced. It had been a long journey, and Thor was famished. He ate a whole ox with 8 salmon to follow. After that he grabbed everything he could reach cramming his mouth and scoffing prodigiously, washing the food down with 3 horns of mead. Thrym watched in amazement and delight. "What an appetite," he growled. "What a woman!" Unable to wait any longer, he lifted a corner of his bride's veil, intent on kissing her. But when he saw her eyes, he dropped the gauzy fabric with a cry. "Her eyes! They burn like fire!" The maidservant leaned forward and whispered in his ear. "Freya was so thrilled by the prospect of marrying you, she hasn't slept for 8 nights." The giant smiled. "Then we'd better let the marriage begin." "Sire," replied the maid, "I hesitate to mention it at this time, but there's the matter of the hammer." "Oh, of course." Thrym clapped his hands and bellowed, "The hammer! Bring forth the hammer!" There was a hurrying and a scurrying, and Mjolnir was fetched. The instant he saw it, Thor's heart soared. He leapt to his feet, grabbed the hammer, and ripped off his veil. Thrym's pretty bride vanished. Gasps of dismay broke from the assembled giants as they recognised Thor, son of Odin. With a foul oath, Thrym leapt out of his seat, but he wasn't fast enough. Thor brought the mighty hammer down on the giant's head, smashing his skull. Thrym's sister was next, and after her died every giant and giantess in the hall. Thor and Loki strode through the carnage, and without a backward glance mounted their horses and galloped in triumph with the hammer back to Asgard. The end.